to our heart's content afterwards. Mentioning of foods is permitted at this meeting per group conscience. Terry, you have 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'm going to time myself.
Oh, perfect. Excellent. All right, man.
All right.
The floor is yours.
Okay, I'm Terry, compulsive overeater and alcoholic. Welcome to everybody, all the newcomers. This is the first time I'm ever going to try and weave these two stories together. And it's exciting. I'm excited about it. I'm a little tired. I got up at 4 o'clock this morning. So bear with me. But so one of the things I want to do is just like, what is going on here? Well, I was asked by the service committee to bring more AAs into OA. And as along the way, me and Francis were talking about it. We decided to start this meeting and to bring AAs and OA together. And I think there's a mutual benefit that is possible. And even as I was talking to someone today about this, someone else, she said, the sobriety in AA is so strong, And I'm thinking of when I first started exploring OA, I found this guy, Harlan, his pretty famous OA boot camp in the LA Intergroup, and I listened to it, and he's a guy that got up to 700 pounds. And what really struck me was that he said, instead of going to the OA meetings, he went to the AA meetings in Chicago, because same thing he said was that he found the concept of sobriety to be stronger in AA, and he was able to lose all that weight, even though now he gives boot camps in OA and in Scottsdale, and anybody can go to those, and they're just, they're recorded on YouTube. But anyway, and when the meeting opened up, we were talking about this, and I said that for me, what I have discovered is that my food addiction came before becoming an alcoholic, which I think makes sense. And that's something that I always thought that must be what it is. And but I couldn't figure it out. It took me a long time to figure it out, because there's an insularity between the two programs, as we probably all well know, some degree of insularity. And so what happened with me is was born in Lorain, Ohio, to a working class family. Parents were relatively uneducated, very good people. Neither of them was an addict or an alcoholic. And this is another mystifying thing to me, and now I understand it. And through the gift of both of these programs, of all of the resources that have been accorded to me, to the people I've met, and the things that have just been handed to me, and just amazing resources here. And in both programs, it's just a fantastic resource. So, but in this family, I was the youngest, separated by about 8 years between my siblings and me. I was the youngest, and what I remember is a lot of really good food. And I should tell you something about me. My mother was a Hungarian, and she was a very good cook, as well as my grandmother. And there were really excellent cookies, cakes, all kinds of food in vast quantities, because I think they were recovering from the Depression, and they just weren't used to this kind of plenty, And I was the recipient of all these foods, and but it's also slightly neglected, which I came to realize over a period of time. And that's one of the causative factors in setting up an addiction. So I know exactly what happened to me, because I found a book that someone handed to me in this program called The Addictive Personality. It's a Hazelden book. And in there, they have the different types of families, and the neglectful family is in there. And it says, what happens, to paraphrase, is that the child does not get the intimate bond with the parent or the siblings. Instead, they bond with an object, and it is food in most cases, Could be other things. And in my case specifically, what I remember is just eating huge quantities of these cookies and cakes on the holidays, but all the days in between, we got it every Saturday, and it lasted all week. And I ate most of it. And I remember even when my mother was cooking, I would go down and steal the cookies in the middle of the night, eat from the freezer. I'd eat frozen cookies, It was a big disappointment to my mother and my father, really. They, like, well, I was just making that for everybody, and I would eat it all or a lot of it and ruin different things, really. But I never really got disciplined for it. It was accepted. I think my mother was a little bit proud, She was a really good cook and she liked to see the results of her work like that. And at the time, I wasn't overweight. I was running around. That was back in the days when you left the house in the morning at 9 o'clock and you came back at 5, all dirty. And, that was total freedom, the 60s. And, but I was very active and very, because I didn't have this connection with people. I had never really learned it from my parents. It was really, what was really going on is I was using food to alter my states of mind all the time. I used it in every possible way. But I had sports, and I was an athlete, and I came to be on the wrestling team. I was really good at it. I went to state, and when I got into, well, let me say then, there's something that happened when I was 17, which was completely unexpected, is that my sister was getting married. My parents left the house. There was a bunch of liquor there for the wedding, and so I invited my friends over, and we cracked the bottles, and we drank a little bit off the top. And I drank a lot, and I blacked out. And I went to a community center dance, and I made a total fool of myself. I don't even know what really happened. I only heard about it from other people. I even passed out in the middle of a highway, laying in the middle of a highway. And so a friend of mine happened to just drive up and go like, oh, that's Terry. And they put me in the car and took me home, ended up in intensive care. I was in intensive care for 3 days with alcohol poisoning. And, but because my parents didn't read big books, and even though we're only 40 miles from Akron, which is the home of AA, I never got no one really knew there was anything to do about it or what to do about it. As I said, they weren't alcoholics. So that set up the situation. So then I went through my 20s. I partied really hard. And one of the things I've been thinking about with the alcoholism and the food addiction is that I think of alcohol as, I used to think of it as a superfood. Like it's a superfood in the sense that it can replace all the other desires for a period of time. In fact, one of the things that characterize advanced alcoholism is people stop eating. And that's just shocking, I think, but it's the truth. They essentially stop eating, and they're taking in all their calories through alcohol. It's, like you replace your stomach with your liver, because that's the only place that can be metabolized. So that's incredibly serious. So I never really got to that stage, but I probably got pretty close. So in my 20s, I drank a lot. I started to find the drugs that allow me to drink longer and not black out. Did some cocaine, quite a bit of cocaine as I progressed along. And but I got a sense of I had a handle on it. I never got a DUI. I never went to jail. But I had a lot of problems getting to work on time and, interpersonal problems that were basically a manifestation of the original problem, I think, is that, I didn't connect with people. Was basically isolated, because I just didn't know how to form a healthy relationship. And I had a lot of relationships, but they would end, one way or the other. And so in my 30s, I got married for the first time, and I was in New York City. And I went to my first AA meeting. Somebody I knew that got in a lot of trouble for drug addiction started writing me letters about it. So I went down to a clubhouse that was in Midtown that had been there from practically the beginning of AA. And the minute I walked in, I knew my life changed. It was something about the way the people were talking to one another. It was just totally unusual civility that you find in the meetings, positivity, and just nobody was interrupting one another. I really like that. And I started to go from time to time. I started to experience significant periods of sobriety. And I always say, I adhere to the third tradition. And that's the low hurdle of getting into these programs. I love that. In AA, it's, I have to have a desire to quit drinking. In OA, it's a desire to quit overeating, right? And so I did pretty well with that. I never did the steps. I was a don't drink and go to meetings guy. And, but it worked pretty well, and I went to a lot of meetings, famous meetings like Mustard Seed, went to Trinity Place, which I think was destroyed in 9/11, and all kind of meetings all over the city. It's a great place to drink alcohol and stay up all night, but it's also a great place to recover because there's so many meetings in the city. But so I got through my 30s and I started to gain weight. I was still exercising all the time, belonged to gyms. I practiced Aikijutsu from the time I was 18, even till 10 years ago. I practiced martial arts. I got a high rank. I was able to defend myself one time. I was pretty good at it. And but I still was always gaining weight. Couldn't gain weight by exercising, although I think exercise is important, and I do enjoy exercise to this day. And I don't do that stuff because I have injuries now. And so in my 40s, was drinking more, still had a job, in the city, going to meetings, but it wasn't working as well. I could never really get it together to do the steps. I was always unhappy with my body, and so I eventually moved upstate, continued to do, Aikijutsu, Aikido, and started to go to meetings again, got sober, was sober for a long time, but I continued to gain weight. And I would eat just huge quantities to compensate for what I felt like the exercise should allow me to eat. And I got married again. I got into a food family where they ate all day long and drank in the morning, and things kind of went to pot again. And I started going to OA meetings. I started to think, that was it, that I must, the food problem, I had this idea that the food problem had set up the alcoholism, and I wanted to figure that out. So I started going to OA meetings. I heard Harlan's boot camp. That made a big impression on me, but I was too shy. When I go to the OA face-to-face meetings, it was usually all women. I'd be the only guy there. I felt like I frightened them sometimes, or, whatever. I just had all these problems of talking or raising my hand and all this stuff. In the meeting, I became shy. Usually I wasn't too shy outside, but in the meeting, I became shy. And then one day, I was on a Facebook group of OA called Heart to Heart, which still exists. And somebody sent me a message saying, hey, did you know about the OA men's intergroup? And so I've looked into that, and they had telephone meetings at the time. I started to go to telephone meetings. But then I started to get progress in OA. I got a sponsor. I started to use the tools. And still wasn't really doing the steps. I tried to do them, but I would always screw up on the fourth step. I couldn't get it done. And but I started to make the telephone calls. I had a really good sponsor who explained to me how to make the phone calls. And I related that to the phone call that Bill made to Dr. Bob. That he made that phone call in the hotel in Akron. And I always thought, I'm really doing a mythologically important act. I'm connecting for the first time with someone. And my sponsor told me how to do it, which was, he said, this is how you do it. You call up somebody and you say, this is Terry, I'm a compulsive overeater. Do you have 5 minutes to talk about the program? And that really worked, because the person knew that it wasn't going to take too long, and they put their name on the phone list. So it's better than a face-to-face meeting when you go up to strangers. You might be a person that doesn't even identify as a compulsive overeater yet. But the people that put their names on the phone list are like pre-qualified leads. They want people to call them up. And they're just, these lists for every one of these meetings are huge at this point. That's a fantastic resource. You can recreate that original connection that Bill made with Dr. Bob. That's what I always think. I'm recreating that original connection. And I like that. I like feeling connected to AA and the foundations of the recovery movement. So I started making the phone calls. I got a sponsor. And after 30 days of abstinence, which came by creating a food plan. Now, I didn't think that was going to work, but as soon as I created a food plan, I started following it, which you tell me, why does that work? Well, I made a plan, and then I was making the phone calls. I just see this back and forth between the tools of the program. I would talk to people, and it's always surprising. You hear amazing stuff when you make the phone calls, you know. And and I would read. I got for today the smallest book of OA book for today, daily book, and I would read that, and I would say, "Oh, I got the literature tool down." And it's always good. It would seem to be reading my mind, you know, the book. That was the thing that I was dealing with on that day. The other tools, anonymity. I tried not to gossip, you know, and that's one thing that happens when you come into these rooms. Is like the opportunity to gossip comes up. So I tried not to gossip. That's the only way I could figure to use that rule. And with the advent of the Zoom meetings, I think one of my problems was solved miraculously because I had a problem being honest with people because my anonymity got violated once at a face-to-face meeting. I was afraid to tell the truth at the face-to-face meetings. When the Zoom meeting started, I started to go to like the San Diego intergroup. There's nobody there that can gossip about me. They don't know who I am or where, you know, I don't know where I'm coming. They can't. It provided a safety net for me or a safety fence so that I could begin to be honest with people. And I got a sponsor in the San Diego intergroup that I'm very happy with in the program of OA. The other sponsor had gone the way of the wind. I'm still talking to him, but he's no longer my sponsor. And I started to lose weight, you know, and that was one of my primary goals. But I began to see that what I was really trying to do, getting back to the beginning of what I started talking about, was I was trying to learn how to have healthy human relationships, you know. And this, if you follow this program and all these tools, and the way that I worked this out in my head is that what I needed was to reconnect with my human powers. You know, I'm all for the steps. I'm very spiritual, you know, I do meditation and all this stuff. But I felt like I needed to reconnect with the human race, you know, because that was my specific problem, going all the way back to my childhood. And I would say also that from that viewpoint, I can see why my personality would never change, because the addiction was created as I was growing up, as my personality was in formation. And I'm always going to be that person. You know, you can't change into another person, as far as I know. And as time passed, started going to meeting every day, sometimes 2 a day. And through making the phone calls, I started to find people I liked. This was a huge, you know, thing. And I got friends in the program. And I began to think, hey, I'm permanently in this. So that gave me a lot of confidence in this program. And I always want to be a part of this program, but it just, you know, like today I got 3 calls unsolicited, you know, and a number of texts, and, you know, you're involved. And this is the thing that I was missing when I was a little kid. That's it. You know, that was the thing that completed the circuit for me. So for me, that was the bridge between AA and OA. There's one there that's always there, which is in the literature. You know, it's in the fact that we share the big book between the 2 programs. There's a lot of common wisdom that is shared. Somebody told me today, say, get a home group. And I'm going to say that. That helped me to get a home group, because then I started to do service for the group. And you get involved, you get involvement in the group, you get friends in the group. It becomes a place where you know everybody. You know what they're dealing with. You care about them. And actual human intimacy begins to form. Even over these Zoom meetings, I feel very close with a lot of people on this call. You know, like in everybody else, I have a lot of hope, you know. And so I ended up losing 130 pounds, keeping it off, and I have a lot of confidence it's going to stay that way. And so that's about 20 minutes, so I pass. Okay.